Welcome to the Ranking Revolution podcast, your source for strategies and ideas for SEO, organic growth, content creation, and business. I'm Doug Cunnington, your host. Today, I get to talk to one of my friends, Ricky Kessler, one of the founders of Income School. And we talk about two main topics. Like many of the interviews, I've divided this longer conversation into two parts. So this first part, we talk about content sites and Ricky's start, and it kind of blends into working with AI, how Ricky uses AI, and dealing with Google algorithm updates. Like a few of the episodes, I recorded this before the March 2024 update. And a lot of times, particularly in this interview, I reference the helpful content update and perhaps an upcoming update that would correct helpful content or change things. That update did come along. It came along in March 2024, spam update, core update. There were a lot of manual penalties. And the unfortunate thing is I recorded some episodes before it started rolling out. So some of the conversation, you have to imagine that we did record this in like early or mid-February or so. It took a little while for me to get this episode out. The algorithm update surprised us by being a major, huge, giant algorithm update coming out in March. And I caught a cold along the way, lost my voice. Anyway, I got a million excuses. The point is, if you hear us referencing things, not considering the March update, it's because we didn't know the March update was coming out because we recorded this in February. So without further ado, we can get to the episode, and be sure to check out part 2 if you like where this conversation is going. I'm pumped today to talk to one of my buddies. I haven't talked to him in a pretty long time, but this is Ricky Kessler, and he's an internet entrepreneur, an influencer, the co-founder of Income School, and he's helped numerous others become financially independent by helping them create online businesses. He has a pretty crazy background, which surprisingly, a lot of it aligns with some of the stuff I've done. Not exactly, but he has worked in a research lab. He's been an engineer at a manufacturing plant. He's worked as a marketing analyst. He has an MBA, and he's worked as a project manager and then a product manager. And I was a PM, and I have an engineering degree. So I think, there's some parallels, and it's funny how we ended up in a much different area doing marketing, which I was a horrible communicator for many years. Some still say that I'm a horrible communicator. But welcome, Ricky. How's it going today?
It's going great. Thanks, Doug. That's great intro. I appreciate that.
You got it. Well, today we're going to talk about content sites, niche sites, authority sites. And you and I have been in this world for a little while, close to a decade for me. And we'll get into your background a little bit. But one thing that I think is interesting is, both of us, we started sites, we had some interest and affinity to it, and then we started teaching, and we became, in air quotes, influencers. We have a podcast, YouTube channel. We created online courses in kind of a sticky area of the internet, make money online, which I think some people do it the right way, some people that do it the wrong way. And then the interesting part in the audience for this show is, SEO pros and people in the industry, people that attend conferences and stuff like that, and they're deep into it. And oftentimes we do see that people in the industry are very technically proficient, but they haven't been able to maybe build a site. So there's a really cool overlap, and there's some territorial stuff going on too. But we're going to be able to dig into the weeds because you and I don't necessarily consider myself an SEO. I'm more of a marketer. So let's get into some of your background, but that's kind of laying the stage, and we're going to get into how things have changed so much. And I feel my sort of lack of SEO chops. I could tell that the SEOs are, they've been doing things a little bit differently, and they have a different view on some of the recent updates in 2023, helpful content and otherwise. So Ricky, when did you get started working online?
Yeah, I started early 2015, so I'm at about 9 years now. And my experience before that with computers online and, a little bit of programming and stuff, there was that. But, digital marketing, content marketing, any of that started early 2015 with an invitation from a good friend from high school who had been blogging for a while at that point. But that's where I got started.
And is it safe to say you pretty much didn't know anything about it in 2015?
Oh yeah. I mean, I made all the same mistakes as every beginner at that point.
Perfect. Okay. So I could tell by looking at, the intro that we have for you here, you're a good learner. You seem to be able to pick things up, in a lot of engineering and project management comes
Mhm.
around to, finding a problem, closing the gap, and just kind of making some forward progress here. So you figured it out. You eventually became very proficient, an expert in the area. Talk just a little bit about starting income school and what the idea was behind that, and any goals that maybe you had in the early days.
Yeah, it's funny because I went to school for engineering, and engineers for the most part aren't really entrepreneurs. But while I was still in college, I kind of got the bug. I had a roommate and cousin who was a business major, and he took me to these business competitions they had on campus. And I'd watch these people presenting their business plans and making pitches to angel investors. And I was like, this is cool. This is exciting. And so I went into the engineering world, finished my degree and everything, but with fully planning to get an MBA, at least, maybe work up through management and stuff. But really, like from the very beginning, I always was doing something on the side, trying to figure out like, what's my thing? What could I do on the side? So, while this is happening, one of my like closest friends from high school, Jim Harmer, he had been going to law school and started his side thing, and he was doing photography for fun, but he started blogging about it. And at the time, this was a while ago. There, niche websites and I mean, it was not really talked about very much yet. And so there were a few people talking about it, mostly just blogging about it at that time. And anyway, so he was learning from people like Pat Flynn in his early days of just the things that were working for him. And he had these little wins here and there, like just kind of figuring stuff out till the point where he was about to graduate from law school and realized that he was now making more as a blogger than he was going to make as a lawyer. And he didn't really like being a lawyer. He does his internship and he's like, I don't really like this. So anyway, he makes use of his law degree now and then, just mostly for our benefit, or now for his benefit. But anyway, he'd been doing this for a while. So he decided to kind of test out his approach and see how it would work. He bought a couple of sites, he built a couple new sites, and reached the point where he's like, you know what? I have an approach to this that works, and I think it's repeatable. I've done it a few times now. I want to teach it. So he starts this blog and a podcast and gets a few months in and realizes this is a lot, because his full-time thing was still that photography site. And he's like, I need a partner. I need someone who's smart, who works hard, who can learn. And it's keen of you to pick that up, Doug. I think, if people ask me like, what do you think is your kind of your unique talent or the thing that you're best at? And I'm like, well, learning stuff, which makes me like never the best at probably any one thing, but I like learning and I'm good at it and I learn things quickly. So he pulled me in, or invited me. And at the time it was a side thing for both of us. We thought, we'll make some money on the side. Maybe someday this could be a full-time kind of thing. And that's what it was. I mean, I was living in Texas at the time, working, just finishing my MBA. And there's a lot of things that sort of happened that we're very fortunate. One of those things was just a few months later, I graduated with my MBA, and then I got laid off from my job. And part of me was just thrilled because I was dying to move back home to Idaho, and that's where Jim was. And also because the company that I worked for had helped sponsor this MBA, and I had this like contract. I was locked in to work for them for at least 2 more years as an underpaid MBA. So instead, I got to go find a brand new job working for a different company who moved me back to Idaho. And, that was fantastic. So I did that. It took a few months where Jim and I both just kind of took a break because I was moving. Jim ended up moving closer to where I was actually. Just they moved around every few years, and we got started. And it started as just like, I'm trying to learn everything I can. I'm writing blog posts during my lunch breaks, and just trying to sort of catch up, right? Meanwhile, Jim and I would get together one night a week to create something, some content together. And that's kind of what happened. And we did that for a while. And after a bit, we took what he had done and all the things that worked best, and we systematized it. There's the engineer in me. It's like, let's turn this into a process that could be repeatable. Like, we're here to teach people. Let's do that. And we created a product, very simple. We called it Niche Site School, 60 steps. Here you go. And, that kind of, it started out slow, picked up a little bit over time. And we started making videos on YouTube. Just, again, creating more content on just other blogs, continuing to test everything we were doing. And then after we'd done that for a little while, we reached a point where we're like, you know what? We can make this a lot better now that we've seen what's working for people, what's not. We see what sort of questions they come back to us with. And we turned it into what we have now, which is called Project 24. That's a full membership with a community and everything. And we launched that. And right after that launched, I realized I don't need that job anymore. And so I got to leave that and do it full time. So there's kind of the still kind of long, but much shortened version of those few years. And it was about 3 years from 2015 to 2018. It was early 2018 that we launched Project 24, and I was done with the corporate world.
Okay, so it was 2018 when you left completely? Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. I didn't realize you got the layoff too. I got laid off in 2015, and I was like, this is great. So I couldn't be more thrilled.
Same year I got it laid off too then. Yeah, it was like, awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, because I don't think I would have had the initiative to quit, because the salary was like, nothing was bad enough to quit. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad enough, and which is it's a rough spot to be in. So 2018, it was kind of, I feel like 2017, 2018, maybe the heyday, maybe creeping into 2019. I was selling a course at the time as well. And I know that for me, those were sort of my biggest years from that perspective, and traffic and all that stuff. And I see you nodding. So those were kind of the heyday.
It really was, especially kind of in that niche site world of, pick a topic, make a website, create some content. Affiliate marketing was solid. Amazon was paying, if you were selling enough, they were paying like 8%. Things were good, really good at the time.
Okay. So on that note, over time, I got a little bored, like building new sites, and it wasn't as fun as it was in the early days. Part of it is just at the beginning, maybe our goals were very humble, maybe a few $100s per month. But then when you reach, 5 figures, multi-5 figures per month, it's not as fun to start a new site. That said, I slowly over, the last several years, I was exiting my positions in sites and spending time doing other stuff, which I've talked about elsewhere quite a bit. That led to me starting sites just so I could stay up to date with what was going on, have course material, have stories to tell.
Yeah.
What about you? Were you slowly, and share whatever you want to or don't want to, Ricky, but I want to ask, like, do you currently have sites? Were you slowly exiting? Did you sell some? Did you buy some? Tell that story.
Yeah, we did a bunch of stuff. In early 2020, by that point, we'd built several sites and we'd bought and sold some over time. In early 2020, we took our whole portfolio of blogs, and some of this comes from, I've mentioned, Jim, my partner at the time, he likes to go big on things. And so, and we're on YouTube, and, so it's like, let's do something big. So we wanted to sell some of our sites, and he's like, let's sell everything and let's start over on blogs. and just create all new stuff. And we had built some really big ones because we'd hired a bunch of college students to just write for us. And so we had blogs with just hundreds and hundreds of blog posts on them. They'd gotten pretty big, but we had them writing, but we weren't really following up that much on optimizing much about them, monetizing them well. So those ones were pretty undervalued, I felt like at the time, but it was still nice. We got a nice paycheck from it, and we exited everything at once. And then the plan was to immediately start new stuff. But at the time, we had just hired, or we were about to hire, a couple of new people. And we decided that we really wanted to focus a little bit more, prioritize really dialing in and learning YouTube and video content. And so we spent a lot of time with our new employees and just our whole team, kind of dialing in what we were doing with YouTube. We actually created a few YouTube channels on different topics to just practice and hone the skills. And so it was like 8 months before we started another blog. But we did, and we finally did. And we didn't really totally follow our own process. We hypothesized a few things that started out working fine, but then the earliest days of sort of the helpful content stuff in what was that, around 2022 when it first started trickling in, helpful content didn't like. And when I say what we experimented with, one of the main things was with these kind of niche websites that we had done in the past, one of the big keys was just to find low competition, kind of long tail keywords, and you can rank number one for that stuff. And, maybe you can build a little bit of authority by ranking for those and try some things with a little more competition, but we're going to focus mostly on low competition. We're going to get that traffic. Well, we went just all in on, we're going to find a whole bunch of search queries that there's no competition for, and we're just going to write all of those. But there was no topical authority being built at all, because we were just shallowly covering a whole bunch of long tail keywords. And so the traffic, like cookforfolks.com is one of our websites. It's a cooking website just about cooking for big groups of people. It's not really a traditional cooking site because it's not full of recipes and stuff, which are very competitive. It's just answering simple questions people have. Like, a lot of the articles are, how many bags of chips do I need for 50 people? And, we cover kind of all different sizes, and we talk about the different kinds of chips. If you're talking tortilla chips, if you're talking potato chips for a barbecue, it's going to be a little different, right? And it was just a whole bunch of that, but kind of scattered across all food types and all sorts of stuff. And so, like May 2022, the traffic had been going up and up and up, and it stopped and it dropped, and it just kind of stagnated from there ever since. And it's been slowly creeping up because we've been doing a little bit of work to it. But, that was the hypothesis was, it should work. Let's just try to rank for all these low competition, long tail keywords. And it worked for a little bit, but Google didn't like that anymore. So right now we have a few blogs. I started one a year ago, a new one that I still haven't publicly announced what it is, because I'm trying to build it very organically, but I was trying to do it kind of quickly. And then last year, threw a few punches at me. So I didn't get as far as I wanted to get, but I've got that one I'm working on. So we have a few right now that are kind of at various stages. Cook for Folks has been around a while, but we haven't put a lot of emphasis on it in a while. And that's one of my projects for this year, is a complete revamp of that site too. So lots going on, still doing it, for sure.
And I love that you're still doing it, because I haven't started a new site in a few years, and I look at Spencer Hawes over at Niche Pursuits, and guy loves building new sites. Like, every few years he does another thing. He's staying current. I was lucky enough to meet him at FinCon a few months ago, and
cool.
he's into niche sites. I was like, "Don't you get bored with this stuff ever?" And he's like, "Nah, I really dig it," and that's cool. At some point I was like, okay, I'm not seeing the returns like I was in the past, and I have other interests, and I'm
Yeah.
spread thin in a different way, right?
Yep.
All that to say, it is a cool industry overall, but it has been shifting. And I know, I mean, you did call yourself out a little bit and say, we didn't actually even follow our process. Like you were testing something,
Hmm.
but with the test, it probably could have performed fine like a few years ago. Like we have done that, right? The
Yeah,
keyword
it
golden
started working
ratio.
fine, but then it just like hits a Google update that started to shift things, and the progress, like the trajectory was exactly what we'd seen before. It was fine.
Then
Not
boom.
anymore. Yeah.
Okay. So let's shift into some of the updates and what you've seen. You described that one specific project, but you have students, you have other people, there's folks in our network. We just hear chatter within our mastermind groups or whatever. So these last few updates, say, let's just focus on 2023, where there were a couple, and then helpful content update really slammed a lot of people, a lot of big sites. I have some friends that were making like, say, 20 to 40,000 per month, and it's down to like $1,000 a month. I mean, it's devastating, absolutely devastating. So what have you seen? What's the word on the street on your end?
Yeah, it's been really tricky because with a lot of big updates, we're able to kind of pinpoint a few things. With 2023, um, different industries, different it's kind of behaving differently for different people, which is really weird. Things that are working really well for some people didn't work at all for other people. So what I feel like or like the chatter, what we're hearing, and from seeing so many different responses depending on the types of websites and the niche and the industry, um, it seems to me like what Google's trying to do is help steer people toward the content that should answer their query based upon what their intent was, right? And I think that's kind of been their goal all along, but they're getting a little better at it. But I also think that in order to sort of combat the proliferation of content that we saw with AI, and a mass amount of, I mean, don't get me wrong, AI can generate some pretty good content and it can be used as a really great tool, but we saw a lot of content get produced at scale we've never seen before that was not vetted. It's just like, let's get the AI to write the content. Let's check all the SEO boxes, right? All the on-page SEO stuff. Let's just make sure that it can rank well, whether or not it's accurate or helpful to people. And so it does seem to me that Google sort of, in an effort to try to combat that, they may have overshot it a little bit. I mean, at this point, we're seeing how much, like tons of SERPs, like search results that are showing, Reddit and Quora, like forum type content, user generated content, because it seems like what the user wants, the user search intent is they want to get other people's opinions. They want, human advice, and they want human answers to questions. They're not just searching fact-based stuff. They're looking for, guidance on certain things for a lot of search queries. And for that, I think Google's having a hard time sorting through all the content and figuring out what to trust. So things that I've seen that are working for some people, one is establishing better EEAT, basically trying to send the signals to show to Google that like there's a legitimate person or business behind this, whether or not that person physically wrote every word, Google doesn't care. But if there's a legitimate person behind it with a reputation that's decent, it's going to do better than, a lot of niche sites in the past. We've been able to be very anonymous. I don't think that means you can't use a persona, but the persona needs to have the signals that it's legitimate, and that could mean like literally creating social profiles in a LinkedIn and stuff for a fake person. But yeah, so EEAT has been a big one, and topical authority has been another big one. Like diving in deeper on the topics that you cover, and that's one of the big problems with that I was mentioning with Cook for Folks. Is just by never diving in deep on anything, it's like, great, you're an expert at what? Knowing how much food to buy? What's the authority? And the reality is like, I come from big families, and like I've spent my whole life where when we prepare a meal for, a family get together, like literally once a month, I have Sunday dinner over at my parents' house, and all of my brothers and sisters that I grew up with, they all live local, and we all bring our families together. And it is like, a lot of people when they're like preparing a meal for a wedding, and it's a big deal and they have to like work really hard to figure it all out. Like that's Sunday dinner for us,
Yes.
And so like I have expertise in that, but it's not showing on the website. I haven't done anything to make it show on the website because we just wrote surface level content and I didn't even write it. So
Right.
those are the main things is like topical authority, EEAT. There's some other things. I mean, some people are like saying that, yeah, having a nice custom homepage makes your website look more legitimate. But I've seen a lot of websites that are still just kind of a blog roll that are doing really well. But I think it's because for those search queries that they're doing really well with, like a blog is exactly what they're looking for. They're looking for a human being who has some experience to give them an opinion backed up with their own experience and stuff. People aren't always looking for a big corporation or, the big authority on the subject. A lot of times people are looking for experience from someone who knows what they're talking about. So again, that's where I say it's nuanced depending on what the query is. And I think Google's just either getting better or they think they're getting better at understanding what the intent of the searcher is and trying to line them up with a resource that better fits. The other thing that I think is already starting to take away traffic is just like we saw when snippets started coming out and those rich snippets, they got better and better. Well, Google's just getting better and better at generating a response. The search generative experience that we're seeing, for a lot of the queries that we used to be able to get people to click to an article for, like they just don't need an article. They need a paragraph. And Google's just going to give that to them. So the sites that are succeeding are ones that have focused a lot of their efforts on helping people kind of dive to the next level deep. They're answering questions that can't be answered with a quick soundbite.
So a couple directions I want to go with this one. And as devil's advocate, I'm not debating with you.
Absolutely.
All right. So
I love it because the discussion is super helpful. Like I share what I'm seeing, but I'm certainly not seeing everything. That's for sure.
Perfect. Okay. Two observations. Hopefully I won't forget both of them here. So one, this is a two-part question for you. So traditionally income school and your approach was like not towards link building, no intentional link building. Is that accurate? Mostly?
Yes. I'd be happy to clarify a little bit the direction we've gone, but
sure. Go ahead.
If you want to. Okay. So we don't like the term link building because to me, it does make a difference. It's not just semantics. It's not really just about the link. It's more about what it does for you from an authority standpoint and from a industry participation. So we do in what we teach, like when we're helping people build EEAT, we talk to them about lots of different ways to participate in their industry, including like this, like go be on someone's podcast. You get a link out of it, sure, but you also get, recognition in the industry. You get exposed to another audience of people. You get, if somebody interviewed you on a podcast, that speaks reasonably to your authority. Lots of podcasts interview people that maybe aren't super authoritative, but it's a vote of confidence. And I think it's a little bit more of a vote of confidence than just a link, right? And I think Google can recognize that. So there are a lot of activities that we do and that we teach people to do that most people in the industry would call link building. But we never thought of them as link building and we didn't learn them as link building. They're things that we are like, these are good things to do, go do them. And then as I started, I'm watching other people's videos about the best ways to build links. And I'm like, we do all that stuff.
Okay.
It's just, we don't think of it as link building because my goal isn't to link. My goal is to make sure that I do a great job on someone's podcast and make it really valuable so that people will view me as an authoritative resource. And so at this point, to most people, that feels like just semantics. When we started, there was probably more of a discrepancy between what a lot of people were doing and what we recommend. Now, I think we've come together a lot in the industry, but I still don't like the name, and maybe it's just semantics, but to me, it makes a difference because
Yes.
it changes my mindset.
It does. It changes the framing, and I understand exactly what you're saying. I mean, in 2013, 2015, people were building private blog networks and all this other weird
Right.
stuff, which never went away completely, but it's just like
Right.
a different strategy and all that kind. Okay. So that said, typically, there's a couple interesting things, right? So I'll see videos or hear blog posts, or right after an update, some SEOs will create content and say, here are the things you need to do to recover from this update, which of course they don't know what they're talking about because there's not enough time to have tested and elapsed. So they're just regurgitating like all the things that Google tells us to do, which is just, it's not that it's bad advice. It's just like, it's not going to fix your problem that you're dealing with.
Right.
Some people that I've interviewed have a very strong belief that links are really what matters for EEAT, for really having kind of a buffer from these updates. And we can reframe it and say, do you have really good authority in the niche because you are on a ton of podcasts, you spoke at conferences, there are references like all over, do follow, no follow. People are referencing your material and not even linking back to you, but like, is that out there? So from your observations, have you seen any correlation with like links and or authority and a site not being suppressed? Because the thing is, right, like we're coming at this logically and as engineers and hopefully some scientific method. And I'm like, if you could find like 8 different things that completely contradict each other, like we have no idea what we're talking about. So if we could find so many examples of a site with a homepage or with no about page and it's ranking well, it's probably not it's probably not exactly as simple as people think. So links, what do you think, Rick?
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to, do links, is that one of the big things? I think it's more than just the links. I think you hit on some really good things. Even the no link mentions, I think Google is doing a better job of seeing those. But also I think because of the way that it impacts user behavior, when within whatever industry your website's in, right? Within that industry, if you have become a name that people, or at least a good number of people start to recognize, so you have a brand that is, even if it's a personal brand, even if it's your name is your brand, but you have a brand that is viewed as a good resource, if that's happening with people, that also seems to be happening with Google. And there are, I think, probably hundreds of signals, like you said, all the different kinds of links. Having no follow links, is still better than not having links, right? And having some good do follow links, especially from highly relevant and other authoritative sources. You're listed as a speaker for a conference that fits your industry, or several times, right? You've spoken at lots of conferences. And so, and you've been interviewed for news articles, but from reputable sources. Like all of those things are votes in your favor. And a lot of those do include a link. And so I don't disagree that like links probably are one of the biggest indicators or drivers of which sites got hurt the most and which ones didn't. The other stuff, right? The having an about page and I think all those things are good and they're additional signals. And so, you're going to find correlation. You're going to find like, oh yeah, these sites that didn't get hit, they had an about page. It's like, okay, yeah, but some other sites did well and they don't have an about page, but maybe they have a good online presence and maybe for their industry, it's good enough. even without the about page and even with fewer links. And that's the other tricky thing is it's like, if we're going to do pretty scientific study here, we have to acknowledge that like for different industries and even different search intent and queries within an industry, the ideal resource isn't always the same. It's not all like, there are lots of things you could ask a question for where it's like, it doesn't actually matter if that person speaks at conferences and is viewed as an authority. It just matters to me that like, you know, they're going to give me, you know, a recommendation for hiking gear. It matters to me that they hike a lot, you know? And so that's where I think some of the studies break down is we try to oversimplify it. And we try to say, well, look, you know, 90% of the sites we looked at that didn't lose traffic have an about page. So let's have an about page. Or, but you find the anomalies. You're like, well, this one didn't, and it doesn't have that many backlinks. But let's look at where it fits compared to its competitors for the space where it sits. Yeah, actually, they do have more authority than those other websites. So that's my long-winded answer. Saying basically, I don't disagree that links and the other things that those links are signals of, the actual industry, you know, participation and expertise within that industry and recognized authority within that industry, all those things kind of put together, that brand, that reputation that you have ends up, I think, being one of the biggest indicators of who succeeds and who doesn't. And it doesn't mean that you have to be WebMD or, you know, some huge website with tons of content that's been around for 30 years. It just, I think it means setting up the right signals, which includes links.
It's a great framing, great answer. It's very complex, as we all know. Yeah. That concludes part 1 with Ricky. So if you want to find out the rest and how the story ends, be sure to check out part 2. I appreciate you checking out this new podcast. If you're listening to this in the future, you'll know it was a very successful podcast and you're just going back through the archive. But if you're listening to this in, 2024, it'll help a whole lot if you leave a review, maybe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you can leave a review, and subscribe wherever you're consuming this, whether it's an audio platform or YouTube. Subscribe. If you're on YouTube, leave a comment. You can say, hey, Doug, I like your shirt. I really appreciate how you shine your head before and after each episode. And that's right, I shine after the episodes too. And just anything. It doesn't even matter what the comment is. Just leave a comment. And I definitely appreciate it. So thanks a lot for the support. And I'll catch you in part 2 with Ricky Kessler of Income School.